I want you to imagine waking up tomorrow morning, right? You grab your coffee, you sit down at your desk.
As you do.
Yeah, exactly. And you find out that the central gear of your entire tech infrastructure has just poof, vanished overnight. It is completely gone.
Oh, that is the ultimate nightmare
Oh,
scenario.
it really is. And here's the kicker. It didn't disappear because of like a software bug. It wasn't a server crash. It wasn't even a ransomware attack.
Right.
It vanished because of a government order.
Which is just a chilling scenario for anyone building software today.
Yeah.
Because you're suddenly realizing that your uptime, the very foundation of your app's reliability is no longer entirely in your control.
And that is the exact mission of today's deep dive. We're looking at a brand new article from June 24th, 2026. It's written by Samuel Williams over at datapro.news, and it's titled, appropriately enough, The Kill Switch in Your Data Stack.
It's a great piece, really eye-opening.
Oh, totally. Our goal today is to understand why relying on closed frontier AI APIs is, well, it's no longer just a technical choice you make in a Tuesday sprint planning meeting. It has become this massive geopolitical and legal vulnerability that could literally halt your operations in seconds.
Literally seconds. Yeah.
And before we dive into the deep end here, since we are going to be touching on some pretty sensitive geopolitical decisions, national security claims, and relations between the U.S. and China as outlined in the article, I want to make one thing crystal clear for you listening.
Yeah, this is important.
We are here strictly to unpack the architectural and data engineering implications. That's it. We are not taking sides, and we are absolutely not endorsing any of the political policies or national security claims mentioned in the source material. We're simply looking at the facts as presented, just to understand how they impact your tech stack.
Exactly. Which, honestly, is a profound shift in how we think about our tools anyway. We are moving from viewing an API as this simple, unlimited utility to viewing it as a highly regulated, highly volatile asset.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we really need to look at the inciting incident that kicked this whole new reality off. Let's go back just a couple of weeks to June 12, 2026.
Right, the big day.
The day everything changed. The U.S. Bureau of Industry and Security ordered Anthropic to cut off access to their brand new, highly anticipated models. We're talking Claude Fable 5 and Claude Mythos 5.
And the scope of that order was just unprecedented.
Wild, right? They didn't just order them to block IP addresses coming from a specific country. They ordered them to cut off access for every single U.S. foreign national on Earth.
Yeah. Even Anthropic's own visa holding staff. Think about that.
It's crazy. And because Anthropic couldn't instantly verify the citizenship of, hundreds of millions of users across their entire global platform in the super narrow window they were allowed, they basically had no choice.
No choice at all. They had to pull a global kill switch. They shut both models down entirely.
Which is insane because the models had only been live for 72 hours. Like, people were just starting to see how game-changing they were. They were actively building production pipelines over those 3 days, and then boom, nothing, just zero access.
Right. And while a lot of the mainstream commentary out there has filed this whole thing under, geopolitics, Williams makes this really crucial pivot in his article.
Yeah, I love this part.
He argues that the real message here is that a closed frontier API is a dependency that a government you do not answer to can revoke without notice.
Yeah.
And if your architecture cannot survive that sudden revocation, the failure is yours. It's not Washington's.
Wow. That is a really tough pill to swallow for a data team. But, okay, we know what happened on June 12. But how did a highly anticipated model get legally nuked so incredibly fast?
It was essentially a perfect storm.
Yeah, the article details 3 converging threads that caused this shutdown. So let's go through them. The first thread. The White House had, just days earlier, forced Anthropic to revoke access for South Korea's SK Telecom.
Right. And the stated reasoning there was due to structural ties between the SK group and state-controlled Chinese entities. So even going into June, there was already this heightened governmental sensitivity around who exactly was accessing these specific frontier models through corporate partnerships and enterprise tiers.
Okay, so tensions are already high. Then you throw in the second thread, Amazon. Now, Amazon is an Anthropic investor, sure, but they are also a massive cloud rival.
Very aggressive rival, yeah.
And Amazon researchers reportedly flagged that Fable 5's guardrails could be jailbroken. But wait, this wasn't just like a clever prompt to make the AI write a mean poem or say something inappropriate?
No, not at all. This was serious.
They found it could expose what they called Mythos-class cyber capabilities, specifically zero-day vulnerability discovery at scale. And I think we need to pause here because that sounds terrifying. But what makes an AI model uniquely dangerous for zero-day discovery compared to traditional hacking tools? Like, why is this different?
It really comes down to the sheer volume of context these new models can hold and synthesize all at once.
Okay.
Traditionally, finding a zero-day exploit, which is, a software vulnerability, totally unknown to the software's creator, that requires a human researcher spending months reverse engineering compiled binaries or manually tracing code logic. It's incredibly tedious.
Right. It's like finding a needle in a haystack, but you have to check every piece of hay by hand.
Exactly. But an advanced LLM, like Fable 5, it can ingest millions of lines of a company's code base or an entire GitHub repository's commit history in seconds.
Just instantly.
Instantly. It can map the logic flaws and correlate these really obscure memory leak vulnerabilities across microservices that no single human brain could ever hold in its working memory at one time. It essentially turns a chatbot into an automated cyber weapon factory.
Oh, wow. Which fundamentally elevates the model from just a cool commercial developer tool to a massive national security concern in the eyes of regulators.
Right.
And that perfectly sets up the third thread. Anthropic already had pre-existing friction with the Pentagon. They had previously refused to allow their AI to be used for domestic surveillance and autonomous weapon targeting.
Right. They had drawn a hard ethical line there.
So you mix telecom corporate alliances, automated zero-day cyber capabilities, and political momentum from that Pentagon friction, and you get this totally unprecedented shutdown order. But the mechanism they use to enforce it is just wild. The article calls it a deemed export.
Yeah. It is an incredibly aggressive legal theory under a regulation known as EAR, Section 734.13. They are classifying the simple interaction with a cloud API as a literal release of controlled technology.
An API call?
Just an API call. And crucially, they're saying it is a release to the user's country of citizenship, regardless of where that user is physically sitting when they type the prompt into their keyboard.
Okay, so it's not about the data physically crossing a border at all?
Not even a little bit.
It's almost as if, okay, it's like the government is saying that checking out a digital library book while you're sitting in a coffee shop in New York is legally identical to packing a physical crate of hardcovers and shipping them across the ocean to an adversary nation simply because of the passport connected to the library card you hold.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. The legal doctrine completely detaches the concept of an export from physical geography and attaches it entirely to human citizenship.
But wait, my first instinct as an engineer reading this is that this legal theory is completely untested, right?
Yeah.
Has treating a cloud API call as a physical export ever actually held up in a courtroom?
Well, it is entirely untested in court for this specific application.
I knew it.
However, this is a big however, there was a piece of legislation mentioned in the article called the Remote Access Security Act, or RSA. It actually passed the House 369 to 22 back in January.
Oh, wow. That's a huge bipartisan majority.
Very much so. It hasn't been enacted yet, but that bill would put this exact API as export theory on firm statutory footing. So the intent from lawmakers is clearly there.
So the law hasn't even fully passed yet.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where practitioners find themselves in a really difficult spot. You have to hold two contradictory truths in your head at the exact same time.
Okay, what are they?
The first truth is that the doctrine is absolutely legally contestable and might be thrown out by a judge eventually. But the second truth is that its devastating effects on your architecture are already very real today. You can't just pause your business and tell your customers, hey, wait for the courts to figure it out over the next 3 years.
Yeah, that's not going to fly with any enterprise client. Which brings us to a really interesting debate. Because if I'm playing devil's advocate, I might look at this and say, look, this was a freak convergence of events. A brand new model, a zero-day jailbreak, a telecom issue, political beef, and an untested law.
A total black swan.
Exactly. If I'm running a data team, shouldn't I just ignore this? We're always told not to over-engineer for things that will never happen again. And the article actually outlines a steelman argument against panicking.
Yeah, the strongest possible argument for why a tech leader should just carry on as normal and keep hard-coding those API endpoints.
The steelman argument basically has three pillars. First, like we said, it was a black swan event, chasing that kind of tail risk wastes expensive engineering hours. Second, open weight models like GLM 5.2, DeepSeek, or when they exist.
They do.
And just to clarify for everyone listening, open weight means the core parameters of the model are freely available to download, unlike an open source software project where every line of training code is transparent. But with open weights, you have to manage your own GPUs, you do your own safety tuning, and apply your own security patches. So paying a provider like Anthropic for managed safety is still a highly rational trade-off.
Very rational, yeah.
And third, like we just discussed, the legal theory might get struck down.
It is a very comforting argument to make in a boardroom. I get why people make it. But Samuel Williams systematically dismantles it in the article by explaining why this is no longer a tail risk. It is a baseline risk.
How so?
Because the June 12th directive establishes a reusable doctrine. The same machinery, this idea of a deemed export, combined with national security discretion, can now be pointed at any U.S. AI lab and any frontier model.
Oh man, so it's not just Anthropic.
Not at all. If a capability hosted on AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud can be switched off globally without a migration window, the question for your data team is not, will lightning strike Anthropic twice? The question is, when will a modern my team depends on vanish next?
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly terrifying for anyone in HR or engineering management. We talked about the library card analogy earlier. The trigger for this entire thing is citizenship, not location. Williams calls it the citizenship trap.
Because there is no allied nation carve-out in this initial enforcement.
Meaning, if you have an engineer sitting in your London office or your Bangalore office or even your San Francisco headquarters, but they hold a passport from a restricted nation, they are treated exactly like an adversary nation engineer sitting inside that adversary nation. The legal exposure travels with every single foreign national in your entire value chain.
And the penalties for getting this wrong fundamentally alter the risk-reward calculation of using these services.
Give me the numbers. How bad is it?
The civil penalties run to roughly $300,000 per violation, or potentially twice the transaction value. And that is before you even get to the criminal exposure.
Wait, let's do the math on that. A typical API query costs, what, a fraction of a penny? Say 0.01 cents. And the civil penalty is $300,000.
Per unauthorized call, yes.
So if you have an automated script that gets caught in a retry loop and it fires off 1,000 unauthorized queries in 10 seconds before your system crashes and you can hit the kill switch, your company just accrued a $300 million fine while you were in the kitchen pouring your coffee.
It is mathematically absurd, which is exactly why the tech sector is so paralyzed by it right now.
You know, as a brief side note, before we talk about how to actually fix this, the article mentions a fascinating detail about how the broader tech ecosystem is responding to this wild volatility.
Oh, the Kelshi markets.
Yes.
Huh.
For listeners who follow the AI race, there are actually people trading real money right now on Kalshi prediction markets. They are literally betting on Claude versus Gemini or GPT-7 versus Llama 5, wagering on which lab ships AGI first based on these exact regulatory actions and sudden model takedowns.
It really shows how this sector is being treated like a geopolitical stock market. The volatility is the point.
It's wild. But okay, let's get practical. Let's say you're listening to this, you're a data engineer, and you are sweating bullets looking at your current sprints. We've established the threat is real, the doctrine is reusable, and the penalties are potentially business-ending. What exactly are data teams supposed to do about it? How do you survive this?
Well, Williams outlines a pretty comprehensive architectural shift in the article, and it starts with the gateway.
Okay, step one, the gateway.
This is the most critical change you can make today. You have to stop calling proprietary APIs directly from your application code. You cannot hard-code a direct endpoint to OpenAI or Anthropic anymore.
Just entirely bad practice now.
Totally. Instead, you need to place a model routing gateway, essentially a semantic router, in front of every single data pipeline.
So instead of a dumb pipe that just passes the text along, the gateway acts as a brain. I imagine it's inspecting the prompt before it ever leaves your internal network.
Precisely. A semantic router runs a lightweight, fast classifier on every single request. It assesses the security classification of the prompt, the required reasoning depth, and the current availability of your external providers.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, so if it's a routine task like basic text summarization or formatting JSON, the router diverts that work entirely to self-hosted, open-weight models running on your own infrastructure.
Things like Quinn 3.6 or Z.AI's GLM 5.2. And it's an incredible detail in the article, actually, that ZAI released GLM 5.2 under a permissive MIT license on the exact same day Fable 5 went dark.
The timing was impeccable.
Right, so the capable open weight options exist. So you reserve those closed frontier API calls only for your absolute most complex reasoning-heavy needs.
The overarching goal here is resilience. When a frontier model becomes legally unavailable, your system needs to treat it as a fallback path, not an outage. It gracefully degrades to an internal model instead of crashing your entire customer-facing application.
Okay, so a semantic routing gateway protects you if the frontier model completely vanishes. That's step one. But what about step two? What if it doesn't vanish? What if it stays online, but the provider quietly changes how it behaves to comply with a new government mandate? The article calls this silent failure or silent nerfing, and it honestly sounds insidious.
It is. What's fascinating here is that software engineers are used to software failing loudly. You get a 404 error, a server timeout, or a clear stack trace. But with these frontier models, the failure is often intentionally quiet.
Right, because when the Fable 5 safety classifiers originally started rerouting prompts during those chaotic 72 hours, the API didn't give a clean error code. It just returned a generic refusal stop reason.
Exactly.
But even worse, the article reports that providers are using something called PEFT parameter efficient fine-tuning to degrade the output quality without ever triggering an error code. How does that even work?
This is crucial to understand mechanically. The providers aren't retraining the massive billion-parameter-based model from scratch to make it safer. That takes months and costs millions.
Right.
Instead, they are injecting a small adapter layer of weights, the PEFT layer specifically tuned to refuse complex, risky queries. This fundamentally steers the probability distribution of the model away from giving a helpful answer and pushes it to a generic, safe, or heavily caveated text.
And because it still generates text, your automated pipeline just accepts the degraded output as if it were a successful run. It literally poisons your downstream data.
Yes, it breaks the pipeline silently.
If the API won't give me an error code, my first instinct as an engineer is that I can't trust the provider's telemetry anymore. I have to build my own lie detector test for the output. Is that what Williams suggests?
That is exactly the mitigation. You have to instrument for silent failures internally. You need to add automated output quality evaluations into your observability stack immediately.
Like running benchmark tests on the API's responses in real time.
Spot on. Because the provider is not going to send out a press release when they alter the model weights underneath you to comply with a secret subpoena. You have to measure the capability degradation yourself.
Wow. Okay, so that's step two. So you've routed your model securely and you've built in quality checks to stop silent failures. But even if the model performs perfectly and gives you a brilliant answer, we hit step three. You just collided with a massive legal wall regarding where that entire interaction is physically stored. The article points out that Fable 5 mandated a 30-day traffic retention policy across cloud platforms like Console, Bedrock, and Google Cloud.
Which, to be fair, is standard practice for API providers. They log your prompts and outputs for 30 days to train their own safety classifiers and monitor for abuse.
Sure.
But that standard practice creates an immediate, severe crisis for the enterprise user right now under this new export doctrine.
Because what if you, as a business, promised your own customers zero data retention? What if you operate under strict GDPR compliance in Europe? You can't just let a third-party API hold your customer's sensitive financial or health data for 30 days in a U.S. data center that might suddenly fall under an export restriction.
You really can't.
The article even notes that Microsoft reportedly had to block their own internal use of Fable 5 over this exact 30-day retention issue while they were simultaneously reselling the model to other companies.
The irony is glaring, but it highlights the severity of the architectural problem. If you have workloads carrying personal or regulated data, piping it out to a closed API is no longer a risk you can hedge with a simple business agreement. Williams argues that a sovereign enclave is now the only defensible position for sensitive data.
And a sovereign enclave essentially means you are running an open-weight model entirely on your own private cloud or on-premise hardware, where the data never touches the public internet or a third-party logging server.
Exactly. You maintain absolute physical and cryptographic control over the weights and the data flow.
Which brings us to the fourth and final step in the survival guide. We've talked about the code, the gateways, the enclaves, but there is a massive human layer to this vulnerability. Williams calls for a technology control plan. And while it sounds like, just bureaucratic paperwork, it seems vital to actually surviving an audit.
Oh, it's the administrative foundation of everything we've discussed today.
Yeah.
A technology control plan requires you to map out every single AI integration inside your company. And the real danger isn't the official integrations your data team built.
It's the shadow AI.
It's the shadow AI.
Right. Imagine you're auditing your own company's Slack channels or engineering workflows right now. How many of your developers are passing proprietary code snippets through an unvetted personal AI account just to save time on debugging?
Probably a lot of them.
And that shadow AI is now a massive legal landmine for you under this new export doctrine.
You have to classify every single tool by its data logging rules and its access requirements. You must document the internal controls that isolate restricted models from unauthorized personnel, regardless of what office they sit in.
That sounds exhausting.
It is, but data teams are incredibly accustomed to doing this for databases. Now they have to apply that exact same rigor to the models themselves, and uncomfortably, to the citizenship statuses of the people who interact with them.
So what does this all mean? If we look at the big picture shift here, it feels like the very definition of a data engineer has changed overnight.
It really has.
For the last decade, a data engineer's job was essentially to make capability flow, connect this API to that output, pipe the data from point A to point B as efficiently as possible. But starting this month, following the June 12th shutdown, the job is no longer just about flow. It is about making capability survivable.
This raises an important question for every tech leader listening today. Have you explicitly designed your system for the cloud provider disappearing? Have you designed for the model silently degrading and feeding you garbage data? Multi-model abstraction and provider-agnostic routing are no longer nice-to-have architectural choices you can push to the next quarter. They are core survival competencies right now.
Absolutely. Now, I want to leave you with one last mind-bending puzzle from Samuel Williams's article to mull over. We've talked extensively about the API query itself being restricted as an export. But what about the output?
Oh, this is a great point.
Let's say you legally use an export-controlled AI model in the US to generate a massive piece of code or a complex architectural design for a new product, and then you unordinary commercial business export that resulting output to your own foreign office to be implemented. Does that output inherit the legal export control of the restricted model that generated it?
That is the million-dollar question keeping compliance officers awake at night, and right now the law is entirely unsettled on it.
And that ambiguity lands squarely on the shoulders of everyday commercial businesses, not international spies. It's wild. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Tomorrow morning, when you brew that coffee and sit down at your desk, I want you to take a long, hard look at your tech stack, because you have to ask yourself, if the government flipped the switch on your central gear today, would your business survive the afternoon? Think about it.